Tim Scott's presidential campaign ended this week, as the candidate admitted publicly what had been pretty clear to anyone paying attention for a while now. Republican voters were not buying what he was selling. The South Carolina senator started with low single-digit support. Well, that really never changed. When he got out of the race, Scott was averaging 2.5% of the vote in national polling, according to Real Clear Politics, which is basically where he'd been the whole time. So what's really interesting to me about this, though, is A, what exactly was Tim Scott selling, and B, what it tells us about Republican voters that they weren't buying it. So start here. What Scott was selling was pretty simple: optimism. America is not a nation in decline, Scott said on the day he announced his presidential campaign way back in the spring, adding, "This is the freest, fairest land where you can go as high as our character, our grit, and our talent will take us. I believe America can do for anyone what she has done for me," Scott would regularly say on the campaign trail, casting his own personal story, the son of a single mother, first person in his family to go to college, etc., as evidence that the American dream was thriving. "The hope within the American people is still alive and well. We just need to bring it to the light," Scott wrote in an op-ed in the New York Post, adding, "To bury hope and optimism is to suffocate the American dream." You get the idea. There's plenty more quotes, but they're all like that. Scott's entire campaign message was premised on the idea that Republican voters wanted to be inspired and uplifted, which historically has been a pretty good bet. There was Ronald Reagan's shining city on a hill, and George H.W. Bush's 1,000 points of light. Heck, even George W. Bush's compassionate conservatism message was an appeal to the better angels of the Republican Party. But it did not work for Tim Scott at all, and I'll tell you exactly why. You need to look no further than the message pushed by the candidate currently lapping the Republican presidential field. Here, for example, is how Donald Trump celebrated Veterans Day. Look. Marxists, fascists, vermin. Yes, vermin. This is by no means an isolated incident. Here, for example, is a line from Trump's speech last year announcing his 2024 campaign. "Your country is being destroyed before your eyes." And here's one from his inauguration speech back in January 2017. "Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories, scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation. An education system flush with cash, but which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge, and the crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now." And just for added effect, here's one from his acceptance speech at the 2016 Republican National Convention. "Our convention occurs at a moment of crisis for our nation. The attacks on our police and the terrorism in our cities threaten our very way of life. Americans watching this address tonight have seen the recent images of violence in our streets and the chaos in our communities. Many have witnessed this violence personally. Some have even been its victims. I still remember when Trump rolled out this decidedly dark vision for the country. I was convinced, based on all my priors, that people would not respond to it, that they wanted to be inspired, not terrified. Whoops. The reality is that Trump understood something fundamental about the current mindset of the Republican Party. They were scared and angry and wanted retribution for what had been taken from them by the elites. They could never really say what was taken from them, but I digress. The mood of the Republican base was actually summed up best not by Trump, but by one of his clones, Vivek Ramaswamy, in the second Republican presidential debate earlier this fall. Here's Ramaswamy in a back and forth with former Vice President Mike Pence. "Mike, I think the difference is you might have, some others like you on this stage may have, a 'It's Morning in America' speech. It is not morning in America. We live in a dark moment, and we have to confront the fact that we're in an internal sort of cold cultural civil war, and we have to recognize that." Yes, that's exactly it. Consider the arc of the 2024 Republican primary race through this particular lens. The two most optimistic candidates in the race were Scott and Pence. "I believe in the American people, and I have faith God is not done with America yet," Pence tweeted on the day he entered the presidential race, adding, "Together we can bring this country back, and the best days for the greatest nation on earth are yet to come." Pretty optimistic. And how is that working out for him? Not very well. Not only are both Scott and Pence now out of the race, but the truth is neither one was really ever a major factor in it. They never mattered because their message was totally out of touch with how the average Republican voter feels right now. Now let's take a look at the other end of that lens, led by Donald Trump, who is crushing the field with an incredibly depressing view of the country. Vivek Ramaswamy is, I think, mostly done as a candidate, but he had a moment in the campaign, which was largely built on the idea that the people and institutions we have long depended on are collapsing under the weight of establishment politicians and old ideas. And even Ron DeSantis, who I know but remains at or close to second place in the race, rode to his spot in the race on a dark message that America was being overrun by wokeness and we were losing our fundamental values in the process. So what? Republican voters believe the country is going to hell. They think, or have been convinced to think, that we are on the precipice of total failure, economic, moral, and otherwise. And they want candidates who meet them where they are. No sunny visions of a bright and promising future here. Doom and gloom, and a promise to turn it around by punishing those who have pushed this country into near ruin. That's what sells. And that's why Tim Scott never stood a chance.